We are representing the country of the Philippines, and our think tank name is the Greenhouse Glaciers, Inc.
The members of our think tank are Elizabeth DeYoung, Siki Lee, Gustav Santra, Yu Tian, and Yifan Wu.
Throughout this video, we will introduce to you some of the vulnerability and opportunity of the Philippines.
We will also give some background information about the history, economy, politics, climate, and vulnerable groups of the Philippines.
We will end the presentation giving our recommendations about how the country should proceed in the future.
Well, it looks like the Philippines is about to get hit with another typhoon. This type of weather system is very dangerous, especially for people living near the coastlines. With further research and geoengineering, we can save many lives and have a positive impact on climate change.
For project 2, we need to start it on defending the situation in relationship to climate change that Philippines faces. How is the Philippines vulnerable to future climate change, or is the Philippines already experiencing climate change in some way? Are there opportunities the Philippines should developing capacity now to take advantage of in the future?
One of the vulnerabilities of the Philippines is the decrease of the rice yield. The hazard is that when the temperature increases by 1 degree Celsius, 10% of the rice yield is lost. With climate change being such a huge issue in the Philippines, this is the sole reason for the decrease of the rice yield. The exposure is that hunger could strike, leading to famished and impoverished people amongst the consumers of rice. Farmers would suffer losing money from crop loss. The sensitivity of this is that farmers are getting frustrated with a decrease in land and water resources, while at the same time the demand for rice is increasing. They are losing money as well as not providing for the consumers. The opportunity from this vulnerability is that national rice companies, for example, Phil Rice, are developing new rice breeds. The ecological change is that this decrease in rice yield will allow farmers in the Philippines to create new rice breeds that will maximize growth as well as minimizing loss. The exposure is that this opportunity will expose the people of the Philippines to an increase in rice production to feed the citizens. The opportunity is that the potential yield is 10 hectares for available semi-dwarf indica rice varieties. Another vulnerability is the heavy unpredicted rainfall. The hazard is that floods and landslides could damage houses as well as causing death amongst the Filipinos. The exposure is that the population of the Philippines are at a particular risk due to the fact that they live in a naturally hazardous prone area, and they are very dependent on natural resources for their livelihoods. People who live on the traditional agriculture and aquaculture will have changes in their lifestyles. The sensitivity is that too much water infiltrates into the soil will cause landslides, which will threaten people who live in upland communities. The opportunity from all this is water allocation. The ecological change is that more fresh water will be available during the monsoon, and the exposure is that the Philippines is an island country and fresh water is an important natural resource for them. The opportunity is that the government could store the water from rain during a monsoon and use that during the dry season. Another vulnerability is the tropical climate of the Philippines. For ecological change, they have year-round warmer weather brings an increase in the variety of fruits. Also, the year-round warmer weather could bring in many tourists for vacationing. Exposure, the Filipinos have an excess variety of fruits throughout the country, and the hunger rate is below average. So the warmer climate could bring more fruits to feed the people. The opportunity is that the Philippines is a great destination for vacationing, so this warmer weather could bring more tourists into the area. The hazard of this is that during the summer, the country experiences drought, sometimes extreme conditions. So this could increase those extreme conditions. The exposure is that due to the warm temperature and high humidity, dangerous storms such as typhoons could form in the area. And the sensitivity is that high sea levels cause many Filipinos to look elsewhere for living or work. Another vulnerability is the storm surge. The hazard is that this is generating high-frequency tides, causing overflowing sea levels and seawalls to burst. This is also destroying homes and many facilities that are used to provide for the Filipinos. Farmlands are also getting flooded. The exposure is that the flooded towns and farmland are leading to famished and impoverished people. Storm surges can cause coastal erosion and saltwater intrusion, causing land salinization and other disasters. The sensitivity is that the strong typhoon storm surge along the coast make the rising water level of 5 to 6 meters, and people are getting very frustrated by this. The opportunity is that it could dissipate heat and bring in more fresh water. The typhoons actually help the Philippines to reduce their heat, which decreases the dry desert lands and brings in more fresh water. The exposure is that near the equator, the tropical and subtropical areas are affected by the long duration of sunshine. The dry heat can be unbearable, and an abundant amount of fresh water could be collected. The opportunity is that the typhoons bring about a lot of rain. More than a quarter of the total precipitation is due to typhoons. Another vulnerability is that the coastal population could decrease. The hazard is that different disasters destroy the living conditions of coastal areas. Those who live along the coastline are suffering from damaged housing due to the high winds and heavy rainfall. People have to search for living places away from coastal regions, which leads to urbanizations in cities further away from the coastline. The opportunity from all this is urbanization and new technology. Ecological change, this will allow citizens of the Philippines to engineer new ways to build homes to withstand the harsh climates of the Philippines. Due to the change in population, people are creating these new technologies and finding new ways to build homes. And it brings about more employment opportunities for many.
For Project 3, is Philippines has been involved in energy production and forest-related activities, among other things that determine its current carbon footprint.
Philippines economy. Philippines economy before the Industrial Revolution and colonization. The economy was well developed. Much of it was due to trades with nearby territories with rice and metals. The Spanish arrived and took control because they wanted to colonize as much land as possible and to make itself the most powerful empire in the world. They also wanted to gain access to spices in Asia and to spread Roman Catholic religion to many countries as possible. Philippines economy during period of global imperialism. The Spanish acquired a share in the lucrative spice trade, developed better contacts with China and Japan, and gained converts to Christianity. Through these efforts, a new cultural community was developed, but Muslims and upland tribal people remained detached and alienated. Philippines economy after the period of global imperialism and industrial revolution. Manila, which was heavily regulated, became an open port for Asian, European, and North American traders. Foreign exchange brought profits to agriculture exporters and were widely seen as a political triumph for its main traditional exports. The Philippines accounts for more than half of the world's coconut exports, rice, sugar, bananas, and forestry. Fossil fuel burning. Between 1976 and 2011, the fossil fuel energy consumption in the Philippines was around 60%. However, from 1976 and 1984, it dropped from 60% to around 37%. This was because in mid-1983, the Philippines had trouble with their economy as well as their political system. During most of the colonial period, the Philippine economy depended on trade, which was inaugurated in 1565 between nearby countries. Deforestation. Between 1990 and 2005, the Philippines lost a third of its forest according to FAO estimates, but the country's deforestation is down since its peak in the 1980s and 1990s. A majority of its deforestation was caused by logging as well as legal and illegal mining operations, which in return caused pollution. Agricultural fires, collection of fuel wood, and rural population expansion all ensured which increased the carbon footprint. Also, since the Philippines was colonized, they were providing raw goods for other countries, in return increasing their carbon footprint. The Philippines have many endemic species that are unprotected when deforestation occurs. Only 5% of the land in the Philippines is under some form of protection. It is found that deforestation also causes soil erosion, drought, and river acidification. Dominant lifestyles of the poor and low-income class. Their income is reduced because of extreme weather's impact on productivity. Due to their wealth, their carbon footprint is very low because they do not have access to many resources. They learn new technology, increase their productivity, and they try to seek jobs in the urban area. Most derive their income from agriculture, fishery, and natural resources. 52% of the total number of households only have about 23% of the total household income in the country. They try to educate their children and get good jobs in the urban areas. Dominant lifestyles of women. They have lower income than men in urban areas. As the men of farming households sought careers in the city, it was women left behind to take care of the fields. More women than men fall into chronic indebtedness related to climate-induced crop failures. Women tend to contribute less to global house gas emissions. Women manage control of their own lesser resources. During disasters, women attend priorities the safety of the family members, especially their children. They have reduced consumptions and more resources for other family members. Vulnerable populations include women and poor people. Women spend many hours hauling water for their families to drink, therefore they are impacted by large climate change if water sources dry up or flood. Women are more likely to use natural resources, and the climate change disasters can cause these resources to be diminished. Many females have to face heavy household tasks and illness conditions alone because their husbands are working in downtown cities. Women also are the child bearers, so they are in charge of taking care of the family, and if climate affects diminished food supplies, this can be difficult for women to fulfill their duties. For poor people, extreme weather conditions affect the means of living for low-income citizens, and they were having trouble finding sufficient food support. Poor people were also having trouble rebuilding their homes after major natural disasters such as typhoons. Different expert organizations implement preparation and reduce risk programs in the Philippine community to face climate change, such as International Institute of Rural Reconstruction. Vulnerable populations of indigenous people of the Philippines are affected with difficult fishing conditions, shorter harvesting seasons, and increase of illnesses from climate change. Indigenous People Climate Change Assessment conducted different plans to support community-based reflection, evaluations, and future-oriented views to face climate change. The indigenous people depend on the land for all of their resources and their everyday life activities. When these are taken away from them, they struggle to meet basic life needs. Malnourished people of the Philippines are affected directly by climate change due to their food sources being diminished. They already have diminished food sources, and when those are taken away from them, they struggle. Natural disasters caused by climate change can affect their water sources, dehydrating and depleting them even more. Climate change effects can destroy community gatherers where people may buy and share food sources. It can also destroy infrastructures where food is produced. Trade-offs. Since the watersheds are drying up the Philippines, they have to decide between watering agriculture and using water as a drinking source. We recommend that the Philippines work on splitting the water evenly and maybe switching to less water-dependent crops. The reforestation programs in the Philippines are creating people dependent on the jobs they provide, and if they fail, people resort to charcoal making for survival, destroying the areas they've reforested and creating greenhouse gas emissions. We recommend that the Philippines create a program to ensure job insurance. Using fertilizers to increase agricultural yield will increase the population to the environment. We recommend that the Philippines work on creating environmentally friendlier fertilizers. During the wet season, when flooding can occur, they will need to switch to crops that can sustain floods and heavy rainfall, which will change the food culture of the Philippines. We recommend that the Philippines work on creating systems to move this water away from the crops. The Philippines are going to have to decide if they are going to build more dams to preserve watersheds that provide so many jobs as well as fishing resources. We recommend that the Philippines set away governmental funds in order to create these dams.
For Project 4, the Philippines has been involved in UNFCCC and Kyoto Protocol. This project requires us to unpack how Philippines has participated in those negotiations since the start of the UNFCCC.
FCCC was established in 1994 to create an organization that could address issues on climate change, and the Kyoto Protocol was put into force in 2005. But it started in 1990s. It was an international agreement that requires an average reduction of 5% from the greenhouse gas emissions recorded in 1990. The Philippines is one of the countries to sign the UNFCCC to express their commitment to sustainable development and environmental preservation. There were 4 platforms listed above. The Philippines' main focuses in the climate change issue involved with agriculture and food protection, protection of watersheds, coastal and marine resources, and protection of human health. The Philippines is one of the countries that most vulnerable to climate change considering. They rank number 3rd globally. They are also less able to cope with extreme events caused by climate change. Due to this, they are firm supporters of the UNFCCC and Kyoto Protocol. The country is very exposed due to its geographical location, experiencing many disasters. This motivates them to keep involved in politics in order for the country to get funds and help from other countries. The Philippines, those are the most pressing issues that are affected by the climate change. Throughout Philippines history, there were many nations attempting to claim resources such as rice and the involvement with Asian spice trees. However, since bigger countries are industrializing off these resources, the Philippines decided to follow and become their own industrialized country. The Kyoto Protocol recommended in order to avoid further anthropogenic and for the Philippines to keep their economy running efficiently, multiple acts were established. The first involvement is passing the Clean Air Act of 1999. Developing countries are called upon to pass laws that will help to preserve the environment through reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. In response to Kyoto Protocol, the Philippines passed the Clean Air Act 1999, which also known as the Republic Act 1949. This was created in order to gain effective air quality management program that will work to get rid of worsening problem of air pollution in the country. This act correlates to the platform of human health by trying to reduce the amount of pollution that humans inhale on a daily basis. The second involvement is the Climate Change Act of 2009, enacted to afford full protection and the advancement of right of people to a healthful and balanced ecology. It serves as an action plan that lays out the strategies and activities to prepare the country to inevitable effect of climate change. This act is correlates to the platform of human health by reducing disaster risk. The third involvement is participation with REDD. After the Kyoto Protocol was established, organizations were created to follow the platform of reducing emissions from deforestation and forest deregulation. This was beneficial since 53% of Philippines is comprised of forests. Indiscriminate logging, fires, pests, and diseases are cited as main causes of forest depletion. The deregulation of upland environment has resulted in low productivity, which also increased the poverty and reduced earnings. The main focus was on strengthening participatory process, social and environmental safeguards, a harmonized methodology for reference baselines, and the establishment of national MRV approach. The fourth involvement is the Renewable Energy Act in 2008. It's also known as the Republic Act number 9513 on December 2008. It accelerates exploration and development of Philippines' renewable energy resources to achieve energy self-reliance, reduce fossil fuels dependency, and prevent fluctuations in the market. It also sets long-term goals and implement fiscal and non-fiscal incentives to investors and suppliers to increase utilization of renewable energy. This act correlates to the platform of watersheds by placing an important role in protecting the environment with the growth of economy. The fifth involvement is the international emissions trading. The greenhouse gas emission is a new commodity that have been served as major issue according to the Kyoto Protocol and various platforms that has related to the issue. Parties with commitment and the Kyoto Protocol have accepted targets for limiting and reducing emissions. Emission trading allows countries to have emission units to spare emission permitted them, but not used to sell this excess capacity to countries that are over their targets. Thus, a new committee was created to reduce emissions, since carbon dioxide is the major principle of the greenhouse gas, and now the carbon is tracked. There are other trading units in the carbon market, such as emission reduction unit, certified emission reduction, and assigned amount units are also used by the party to the protocol to the national readily up to their assigned amount.
For the last project, we recommendation for how the Philippines ought to proceed in the future international climate change negotiations, and what are the financial costs, social concern, externalities, and implications for future generation associated with our recommendation. What is the theory of justice associated with our recommendation for Philippines, and recommendations address the concern of vulnerable groups?
Next is how should the Philippines proceed in the future? The Philippines is a developing country, and those countries that have developed economy or the Annex 1 country should aid Philippines in reducing their greenhouse gases emission. They should display inhabitants from the most vulnerable area to reduce the risk of disease and harm from disaster. The Philippines should also develop their rainwater collecting system and improve the condition of drought and flooding. They should also decrease the risk of high sea levels, and the Philippines should continue to evaluate and contribute to the climate change situation in their country along with all the other countries in the UNCCC. They should keep using the Kyoto Protocol as a platform to cause influence over the country, set standards and meet emission reduction targets just as every other country should be doing. And for the cost-benefit analysis and social analysis, is that our recommendation will benefit our country due to the fact that it will allow the Philippines to receive funding and resources from Annex 1 and Annex 2 countries. It will allow us as a country to increase our economic status and help us as a developing country to grow. In the social aspect, this recommendation will give us allies that have our best interest at heart. Although it seems there are many benefits from our recommendations, there are also consequences that stem from it. If the Annex 1 or Annex 2 country that we are paired up with decide to drop out of the organization, we in return will be at a loss. We will lose our source of resources as well as a lot of funding. For the externalities and implications, factors that cannot be controlled are harsh weather conditions such as typhoon causing massive damages. This will result in major costing aids, cleanup, and damages. Countries that have donated to help Philippines with natural disaster might pull away from donating further to help with the climate control issue. Our recommendation can allocate for countries not donating for this reason by first focusing on rebuilding and improve areas that were hit hard, and then to look forward to the following year to solve further climate change issues. And how our recommendations address game theoretic problem is that theoretic issue that occurred during the game was that country were thinking that if they produce a lot and invest only a little, they will benefit, and these countries heavily relied on other countries for more capital in future generations. Many problems result, such as having almost every country overproducing and investing too much in the same resourcing, which cause many issues for the further generation. Our recommendation will solve this issue by having control on how much countries can produce and force them to invest in certain areas for future generation. And for theory of justice, balancing between reasonable budget with alternative renewable energy or technology expenses are important for Philippines. The outcome of having a better structured plan will cause future generations to benefit. Natural resources are scarce and limited, and if we use more of these resources, then they will become more scarce and lead into future issues. People's incentives to destroy forests for future uses and profits must change in order to reduce emission and also to preserve our rainforest. And how recommendations address the concerns of the vulnerable group. The vulnerable group in Philippines are women, poor people, indigenous people, and minority people. For women, local community provides educational events and opportunities for them to get better knowledge in preparation for disaster and emergency situation. For poor people, organizations implement preparation for reduced risk for low-income citizens in local community to face the climate change. For indigenous people, conducting various plans to support community-based research to make future-oriented, fuel-efficient, and harvesting conditions to help them reduce the impact of diminishing food resources. And the last, for the minority people, expert organization provides sufficient food support to minority people in local communities.